everyone, and welcome to Homework Hotline, the show with all the helping hands on all your homework needs. I'm your host, Isaiah Gira, and this is our show where we bring some tutors to help you with your homework. Each episode, we go over certain subjects for about 10 minutes each, and you guys can join live at our Twitch at Hawk Media Group News and ask questions. Meanwhile, our tutors will be working on sample problems based on the topics currently being worked on in your classes. So without any further ado, let's get our homework on with our first tutor, Leticia, teaching science. Now, Leticia, thank you for joining us. And what type of science do you think we'll be learning here today?
Today we're going to be learning about biology.
Oh, biology. I love biology. That sounds like fun. You may get along with your lesson. You may go right ahead.
Okay, so hi, my name is Leticia, and we're going to go over complementary base pairing. So the truth is that similar to mathematics, science is additive, meaning that it builds upon each other. So a concept you learn in freshman year is something that you can apply to something in junior year. For example, in biomed, we're going over PCR amplification, and we're actually using the concept of base pairing to help us with our assignments. So when we begin, we have to acknowledge that DNA is a double helix, meaning that each strand is held together by complementary base pairs. These nitrogenous bases pair up via hydrogen bonding, and hydrogen bonding is one of the more weaker types of bonding. It occurs here, as I have in my diagram. It occurs when a hydrogen atom bonds to an electronegative atom. Again, it's a weaker type of bond. It's within ionic bonds and covalent bonds. So moving on, the pairing of these nitrogenous bases occurs with rules. These are known as Chargaff base pair rules, and they only means that some nitrogenous bases only click with specific bases. So we had a move right here. So the rules are as follows. Adenine, depicted in green, only pairs with thymine, depicted in red. And guanine, similarly, depicted in yellow, only pairs with cytosine, depicted in blue. Cool fact, cyto actually means blue, which is why it's depicted in blue. So moving on, these rules are often memorized using mnemonic devices such as apples to trees and cars to garages. So the way that we associate apples and trees together, we can associate cars and garages together. So yeah, so applying this to an actual problem, I'm just going to move these blocks over here randomly. Yeah. So using our base pairing rules, we're going to kind of go through this together. So depicted in green is adenine, and using our mnemonic device, apples to trees, we know that it pairs with thymine. So here they are pairing with a hydrogen bond. Moving on, the blue one, cytosine, because we know that cyto means blue, pairs with guanine because cars and garages go together. And we just repeat these. We just repeat this. Wait, I did something wrong. That's okay. Yeah. So these go together like this. Yeah. So we have our red and greens together and our yellow and blues together, and likewise. So it's important to note that this diagram is not generous at all. In fact, in a typical gene, there's actually like about 27,000 different base pairs because you have to include a lot of proteins. And that's pretty much it. It's something that helps you in other concepts in biology, but it's really one of the basic ones. So that's all for me. Thank you, Isaiah.
All right, thank you for the diagram for biology. It was great seeing on the Jamboard. And also, it seems like you have some fans in the chat. Kaylin from Raving for Retail is cheering you on. And also, we have some fans of biology as well. Jacob in the chat says biology is the best type of science. I agree it's up there, but my personal favorite's always been physics. One big shout out to our Homework Hotline crew, Ethan, Jose, Nick, and Miss McLean. Thank you all so much for being our behind the curtain advisors and workers. You guys are so awesome. Now, George, welcome here. You may get onto your lesson whenever you are ready.
All right. So, contrary to Jacob's belief, physics is actually the best known science. And if we take a look at the Jamboard, I have two sample questions here that is relevant to the subjects taught currently. So, our first question is: a car has ran out of gas. Fortunately, there's a gas station nearby. You must exert a force of 715 newtons on the car in order to move it. by the time you reach the station, you have done 2.72 times 10 to the fourth power joules of work. How far have you pushed this car? Now, science, wording is most important. So if we take a look, let's get my pen out. We read this. Now, we use the equation work equals force times distance. So we have to find at least two of these numbers. So we can see one right here, 715 newtons, and that is in place of force. And we get this number right here, joules, and joules is always work. So we can input these numbers into this equation over here, meaning work 2.72 times 10 to the fourth power is equal to force being 715 times distance. And we're trying to find distance because it is stated here in the question. Now, using basic algebra, we can divide 715 out of this and out of this, and that will get us 38.04 meters. Pretty simple, and that will just leave distance, meaning this question is solved. Now, since I know this topic, we're going to use this equation for the second question. Work equals force times distance. Now, if you look at the last, pretend I read all of this, running out of time, but pretend I read all of this. We can take a look at the last sentence. Usually the last sentence is always the question. How large is the force exerted on the car by the racing mechanism? Now, if we take a look at one of these numbers, 31.13 times 10 to the 6 joules, right? That is in place of work. And then we take a look, we skim through this, we see this one right here, right? That is a distance because we see meters, and this is in meters. So equals force times 4.00 times 10 to the second. Now, we can do the same thing as we did with this first question and divide out this 4.00 times 10 to the second off both sides, of course. And that will get us, let's see, let me put this in my calculator real quick. And that will get us 7,825. Now, of course, this is force, and if you take these two units, we are left with newtons. And that is the end of this very quick physics lesson.
All right, thank you so much, George. I feel like I have my PhD now in physics. You guys, you did awesome, George. Thank you so much. And we are going to go into our last lesson, last but certainly not least, with Marissa and pre-calculus.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So today I'm going to be covering dividing rational expressions. I do want to cover a few smaller topics. Maybe people in Algebra 2 might be able to gain something from this as well. So as you guys see, this, if you haven't done this before, it probably looks like, oh no, what am I doing? So I'm going to break it down a little more simply. So if you've covered quadratics before, you know there's always, your basic form is ax squared plus bx minus c. So when you have that, if this is a negative, it means when you factor it, which I'll get to, the signs are going to be opposite. If this were a plus sign, the signs would be the same. So let me explain. Actually, let me set up this problem first. So when you're dividing rational expressions, there's, you have to do this rule of keep this term, make it different color, change this sign, and then flip this entire expression. So if we do that, we end up, this is hard to write. And I'm going to take this as slowly as possible so people who've never done this before, they can maybe catch on. And also people who, like me, have a test today or tomorrow. So change this sign, that's what I meant by change. So keep this section, change the sign, and then flip this entire one so your denominator's on top and your numerator goes to the bottom. If I can use the Jamboard correctly. Okay, so now you have to factor out, any common factors or the greatest common factor, or just factor the quadratic, which I'm going to zoom in here so I can see what I'm doing. So let me just go back, you can see this again. So any numbers you have to multiply, when you factor, they have to multiply to this number and add to this one. So in this case, it's going to be positive 6 and 3. You factor that, x plus 6 minus 3. And this next one, x squared minus 5x minus t would be x minus 10 and x plus 5. That's our first term. Then we multiply it back to our second term, factor out the greatest common factor. In this case, it's 8. So 8 comes out of here, it becomes x. 8 comes out of this, it becomes 5. So 8. Negative 40, positive 40. Positive 40. Okay. And then all of that over 8. All right, let me get this for you guys. See the whole thing. So now this looks even more daunting, but I promise you it's not. So you have to do something called cross multiplication, or cross division in this case. These terms, in order to do this, these have to be separated by multiplication or division. If this said x plus 6 plus x minus 3, you could not do what I'm about to do. Just want to make that clear. So since these are separated by multiplication, both of them, you can cross these out. So now we're going to say this isn't even here anymore. We just crossed it out. 8 over 8 is equal to 1 times 1, which is equal to 1. So you get all of this times 1, which leaves you with x minus 6, x plus 3, all over x minus 10. And that is as simplified as this can get. This is your answer. That's it. So thank you, Isaiah. That's all I'll be doing.
Oh, thank you, Marissa, for the pre-calc lesson. We seem to have some people who are in great support of you. I want my points, username, Twitch username. It says way easier than how my math teacher explained it. So great job on that part, Marissa. And we have Kaylin and Daryl in the chat supporting our Hawk homecoming. They're all seem to be very hyped about it, about our 80s theme and all. And that wraps up our show. Thank you to all of our tutors, Leticia, George, Marissa, Vincent, even for coming to support us in the stream. And if you guys have any questions, make sure to DM us on our Instagram or leave them in the chat here when we're teaching our lessons. So if you guys want to become a tutor yourself as well, go to our Instagram and to our link in our bio and fill out our form there. You guys can become part of the Homework Hotline crew and join us here on the stream. We'd love to have you. So that concludes our show. If you guys ever need help on your homework, then remember, you know who to call. Call the Homework Hotline. We will see you next week, everyone.